Trump just told the world the Strait of Hormuz is open. Markets exploded. Oil crashed 9%. Stocks hit all-time highs. And the financial press declared victory. Every single one of them missed the three words that change everything. What you are about to hear is not a hypothetical. What happened in the past 24 hours represents a rupture in the foundational assumptions of how this crisis is being reported. A gap so complete, so deliberately obscured, that both Washington and Tehran are allowing the markets to believe a lie. And today we are going to prove it, with numbers, with facts, with the physical reality that no tweet, no presidential post, and no closing bell can erase. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Let me start with the exact words. President Donald Trump posted this morning, and I'm quoting directly, "Iran has just announced that the Strait of Hormuz is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you." All capitals. Exclamation mark. The tone of a man declaring victory. Now, let me give you Iran's actual announcement. Iranian state television clarified, and this is the critical part, the SNAIN, that passage through the Strait is, quote, not possible without coordination of the IRGC Navy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the most sanctioned, the most feared, the most strategically aggressive naval force in the Persian Gulf. That is not open. That is permissioned access. There is a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper is wearing a Revolutionary Guard uniform. Four questions that every serious energy analyst, every naval strategist, every intelligence officer worth their clearance is asking right now, that almost nobody in the mainstream financial press has the technical depth to answer. Stay with us. Every question gets answered. Question 1, what does coordinated route actually mean in practice? Question 2, what happened to the mines? Question 3, why is physical oil still priced for scarcity when paper markets are celebrating? Question 4, what does the 10-day clock actually mean, and what happens when it expires? Let's go. What the IRGC Navy just created is not a reopened strait. It is a toll road, a permissioned corridor through one of the most strategically critical waterways on the planet, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, carrying approximately 20% of the world's oil supply on any given day. They have not removed the gates. They have moved them, and they are now the ones holding the keys. Here's the structural reality. Before this crisis, the Strait of Hormuz operated under international maritime law, freedom of navigation, open passage, no IRGC, sign-off required. What Iran has now established with this announcement is a precedent. Every tanker captain, every shipping insurer, every oil major now has to make a calculation they never had to make before. Do I request IRGC coordination? What does that cost? How long does it take? And what happens if I don't? What Iran says it wants? A diplomatic off-ramp that lets markets calm down. What Iran actually wants? Permanent institutional leverage over the most important maritime choke point in the world. This is not an accident. It is the culmination of 40 years of Iranian strategic doctrine. Now, let's talk about the mines, because this is the story that everyone is ignoring, and it may be the most dangerous fact of this entire crisis. Reports from multiple naval intelligence sources indicate that Iran may have lost precise track of mines it planted in the strait during the early escalation phase. Read that again. They may not know exactly where all of them are. They may not be able to clear them themselves. This is not speculation. This is the structural problem with asymmetric naval warfare. When you deploy mines in a contested waterway under combat conditions at night under pressure, the precision of your own minefield degrades. The Soviet doctrine on this was explicit. The Iranian doctrine inherits it. What this means in practice, even if every IRGC officer on duty tomorrow waves every tanker through with a smile, the physical risk in that waterway is not the same product it was before April 2026. Insurance underwriters know this. Lloyd's of London war risk premiums have not collapsed with the oil price. Transit times through a coordinated route are longer. The cost per barrel of moving Gulf crude to Europe or Asia has permanently increased, at least for the duration of this standoff, and possibly structurally beyond it. There are two gatekeepers on this waterway right now. The IRGC on one side, the United States Navy, which confirmed today that its naval blockade of Iranian ports remains fully in force, on the other. One waterway, two armed powers, neither of whom has stood down. That is not resolution. That is a managed standoff with a 10-day clock. Let me give you the numbers the tape is ignoring, because the numbers do not lie, even when the statements do. Brent crude spot price closed last week at $124 a barrel. Brent futures closed yesterday at $99. That $25 spread is not a rounding error. That is the physical market, the market for actual barrels of oil sitting in actual tankers, still pricing for scarcity. Paper markets, futures contracts, things traders buy and sell on screens, priced the ceasefire. Physical cargo did not. On April 9th, the CEO of ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, one of the largest producers in the Gulf, stated that 230 loaded oil tankers were stuck waiting inside the Gulf. 230 ships full of oil, going nowhere. One presidential tweet does not move 230 tankers. Logistics does. Port clearance does. Insurance recertification does. That takes weeks, not hours, not days, weeks. Middle East production has been running approximately 10 million barrels per day, below normal output since the blockade began. The IEA director stated this week that Europe has approximately 6 weeks of jet fuel reserves remaining. Kuwait Petroleum has estimated 4 months to fully restore Gulf production to pre-crisis levels. An analyst at KPLR, one of the most respected tanker tracking firms in the world, put the number at 5 months. Within the next 6 weeks, if this standoff is not fully and verifiably resolved, European aviation begins rationing. That is not a geopolitical forecast. That is an inventory math problem. Now let's address the 10-day clock, because this is the detail that should terrify anyone who thinks today's rally is the all-clear signal. The Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, which is the other load-bearing pillar of this market euphoria, is conditional. Conditional on Lebanon disarming Hezbollah within 10 days. Let me tell you what the base rate on that outcome is. Lebanon attempted exactly this task last year. It failed. Hezbollah has publicly and explicitly rejected dismantling its military assets this week. Not quietly, not through back channels. Publicly, the Secretary General of Hezbollah stated, on record, that its military infrastructure is non-negotiable. This is a civilization that has been fighting for its survival for decades. Hezbollah is not a militia. It is a state within a state with more precision missiles than most European armies, embedded in the political and social fabric of an entire country. The idea that 10 days and a piece of paper changes, that is not analysis. It is hope. And hope is not a strategy. If the ceasefire collapses on day 11, and the base rate says it is more likely to collapse than hold, every single asset that ripped higher today reverses. The oil that dropped back to $99 spikes past its previous high. And the people who sold into the panic 2 weeks ago and FOMO bought today's bounce become the next victims of a market that confused a pause with a settlement. I want to be honest with you about one thing, because intellectual honesty is the only thing that separates this kind of analysis from the noise you get everywhere else. I might be wrong. The talks in Islamabad this Sunday could produce something real. The US and Iran may be closer to a genuine framework than the public signals suggest. Trump has surprised before in both directions. But here's the logic. The physical facts do not support the paper market narrative. The mines have not been cleared. The IRGC has not stood down. The US blockade has not been lifted. 230 tankers are not moving. European jet fuel reserves are not being replenished. And Hezbollah has not disarmed. Watch the facts, not the statements. Watch loaded tanker volumes returning to pre-crisis levels. Watch the US naval blockade actually being lifted. Not signaled, lifted. Watch Lebanon moving on Hezbollah with verifiable action, not political language. Until you see those things on the tape, this is a tradable bounce on a genuinely fragile setup, not the resolution the headlines are selling. History does not announce itself. The British Empire did not know it was ending when it was fighting in Suez in 1956. The United States did not know the petrodollar system was beginning to fracture the morning after Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. Empires and systems do not collapse on the day the headline says they collapsed. They collapse on the day the foundational assumption quietly breaks and nobody in the room is paying attention because the markets are up. The foundational assumption that broke this week is not that oil is cheaper. It is that the Strait of Hormuz is a free and open waterway governed by international law. That assumption is gone. What replaced it is a permissioned corridor governed by the Revolutionary Guard. That is a different world. And the screens haven't caught up yet. The people around you are reading the headlines and celebrating. They are missing the story underneath. Share this. Not for the algorithm. Share it because they need to. Understand what actually happened today. And if you want to be here when the next chapter breaks, because it will break, subscribe. We will be here for every move.